And as we were looking, I remember one time we were driving, she goes, I want that car. That's the car I've been looking at that I was trying to describe to you, because she was trying to describe an SUV she's been seeing. And when she pointed to the car, I almost busted out laughing. All right, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Mastery. I'm your host, AZ Araujo, and I actually had that Matthew McConaughey, his famous line, right? All right, yeah, from Dazed and Confused. And again, a book I recently read, and it's opened up my mind to different things and finding appreciation for just documenting your day. And it's inspired me to really go back to the basics of what we've done with our journals. We are redesigning the journals, and it's something, this is the fourth rendition, the fourth year we've done this, and every year we get more in line to help us really succeed as small business owners, right? As parents, people, as individuals in relationships, and even with our bodies. It is meant to really push us forward, to create something bigger for ourselves, right? Where we can actually document our days. And I've brought in over the last few weeks, I've talked to about 10, 12 different agents and trying to get their input on how we can improve this. And I've taken my meticulous notes over the last year as well. And I'm excited. I'm excited about what's to come with the new 12-week target book. And it is scheduled to come out here in mid-December. So we'll be having a huge meeting here to be able to go over it. And 2021 is even going to be better than 2020. And for a lot of us, 2020 has been an unbelievable year, right? Regardless of what others have said, those that have stuck with the game plan, those that have constantly reflected on their own targets and say, I'm moving forward regardless. I'm going to continue to do what I'm supposed to do regardless of what's going on around me, right? With this presidential uncertainty, with COVID, with all these things. We can sit back and start and lay blame to others, or we can just simply take responsibility for what we have to do. As business owners, as parents, as being married, like taking that responsibility. And, nothing's going to really keep me away from creating the life that I always saw for myself. But, seeing something greater for yourself is not something necessarily that comes naturally. It doesn't. I think it's a conditioning process, especially when you've been in a box all these years, right? Whether through your environments, the way you were raised. I think we're put in a particular box that, seeing something greater for ourselves is not always visible. And last week we talked about the I am statement and how important it is to constantly remind ourselves of who we are. Right? In any situation, in any distressful situation, in any obstacle we're facing, in any challenge that comes our way, it is very important we constantly go back and remind ourselves of who you are. And basically comes from, your experiences, what you've overcome in the past, and realizing that what's in front of you is not necessarily the end of the world. It's not the most negative thing that can affect you. It's all about the perception, right? And the reminders to ourselves of what we've been through before. So I am is the most important and continues to be the most important vocabulary phrase in your, your most important phrase in your vocabulary. But I started thinking about, where our mind is sometimes, right? And I remember, I was spending a lot of time with Carla this weekend. We did a little staycation, and I had an absolute blast. But we spent a lot of time just reflecting on how far we've come, right? And how our perception of life has altered just by simply asking better questions, asking ourselves, why couldn't it be possible, right? I remember one time as we were, buying our first new house, we were 23 or 24, I can't recall exactly, and we had a limited budget on what we can spend every month. And, Carla's truck, she had that ever since she was like 18. It was falling apart. It was like a little S10. It was an S10 Chevy truck. It was no double cab. It was the smallest truck you can buy from Chevrolet. And she had this thing for many, many years. It was a beast. It would leak everywhere, but it was a beast, And part of her daily regimen was to drive, about 40 miles to work. It was a long drive. It was completely on the other side of town. We moved to the edges of town, out there in Litchfield Park at that time, which was considered the edge of town. And her job was completely on the other side of town. So this truck needed to be replaced. And, we were looking, we were on the Auto Trader. We couldn't buy necessarily anything brand new. So it had to be old. And when I say old, I'm not talking about 5 years old. We're looking at like 7 to 10 years older, right? We really needed to find this truck or this new car that fit within our budget. And as we were looking, I remember one time we were driving, she goes, I want that car. That's the car I've been looking at that I was trying to describe to you, because she was trying to describe an SUV she's been seeing. And when she pointed to the car, I almost busted out laughing. I started laughing because I felt that it was so far from a reality that we can create for ourselves. She was pointing out at a Range Rover. It was a Range Rover Sport, right? And to me, it was so far outside of my reach, it was laughable. Carla was serious about the situation of like, hey, we can work towards something like this. And I already conceded. In my mind that's already out of my reach. And what I didn't realize back then is that is negative self-talk, right? Believing that you're incapable of is as bad as telling yourself you're not smart enough. It's just as bad. It is cloaked in, like you're trying to be nice about it, but really it means the same thing. It means you are incapable of. And I remember seeing that car, and I tried to convince Carla that's not a possibility. That's not a reality. Like, this is our budget. This is what we're trying to buy. And that car is way outside of our league. But then, I started really paying attention. Like, when she pointed that car out to me, I started looking at, like, what would it take for us to be in that same situation? And I realized the situation I was in now, in the job I was in, would never get me to that point. I needed to be able to create something bigger for myself in order to make that a possibility. Now, I'm not saying it happened over time, immediately, but over time, I started opening up my perspective of what truly is possible for me. And one of the biggest challenges that I see from realtors that are starting this business or have been in the industry and or have limited themselves on the success is because they believe they are incapable of creating something bigger. That is the negative self-talk. It's conceding to the things you don't believe and conceding to the things that you don't want. And when I said that, when I laughed, I was really just saying, I'm incapable of. And over the years, obviously our situations changed, but I needed to pinpoint situations where I was negative self-talking to myself, right? I was saying things like, it's too expensive. I was also saying things to myself like, I can never create something outside of the job that I was conditioned to work for many years, right? Like, if I create anything outside of that, I don't know if I can make it. And these are things, again, that we have to really look at and analyze. And same thing goes. Like, years later, as I started getting promoted through the corporation I was working at, I ended up in the finance department, right? I ended up in the finance department, and there's a lot of middle management and then upper management. And there was this one situation when I ran into a staff manager, which means that they're higher up. They're receiving stock. They're gonna end up retiring multimillionaires. That was the thing of this corporation that I worked for. It was like, if you stick here long enough, if you sacrifice your life and put endless hours here at this corporation, you will essentially retire a multimillionaire. And I remember, just looking at these individuals, I'm thinking, okay, I can do that. I just have to sacrifice my life for 20, 25 years, right, to get there. And it didn't seem realistic. I'm only 22, 23 years old, and I'm like, wow, is it going to take that long to be able to create the type of lifestyle I have? But they reinforced it very nicely. But I remember one of the staff members pulls up one morning, and I'm outside getting out of my car, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I see this beautiful gold BMW 5 Series. Okay, this was back in 2004. So if you recall, if you're a BMW fanatic, if you like those type of vehicles, you know that was the radical change to their body design. Completely, like, redesigned. It was so futuristic at that time for any quote unquote luxury vehicle. It was just ahead of their time. To that point, they were really still creating these square shaped vehicles. And this one came in with just a beautiful curve. Some people loved it. A lot of people hated it. But it was something different. And I remember him driving up slowly, and I'm like, what is that? Gold. Driving up, so shiny. Tags still on his car. And I'm like, wow. I remember talking to that same owner, and he went ahead and reinforced the philosophy. Hey, if you work hard enough, if you stay in this position, one day you too can have something like this. But that didn't sit right with me, because just like that when Carla brought up that Range Rover, if I fell into that trap, I would feel like I'm not good enough for it until many, many years after. So I had to open up my perspective to go after what I want. I had to open up my mind to say, I'm not just limited to what I currently have. That's part of a negative self-talk, is thinking that life can only get so good. That negative self-talk is what almost cost me my marriage, because I thought the best days were behind me. I didn't see the future. I didn't say if I worked hard enough, if I continue to show powerfully as a man, my marriage can improve. I never looked that route. I always reflected on the past. Things were so much better when we first met. She was so much, she would always support me when we were younger. Now she doesn't support me, right? Making up all these lies and then believing it. Again, negative self-talk is conceding to the things you don't want. So here I am constantly just thinking my best days were behind me, thinking that I'm limited to how much money I can make, thinking that this is the epitome of life. So I really started looking at what it would take to create something now. So I decided to get my real estate license that same year. And I started looking at opportunities to invest. And I made a lot of money quickly, because I decided not to fall into this trap that it would take me years, and that there was only one way to be able to achieve what I wanted, right? I can work towards it now. I can go at it and just completely shatter the stories of limiting myself. So I got my license, and I started buying these properties, and I started flipping them. I started making a lot of money. I almost matched what I was making with my salary for a year. I was like, wow, okay. There is a different way to approach this. So then I started looking at these BMWs, the same BMW that staff member drove up in, and I started seeing that as a real possibility for myself. I said, what would it take to be able to achieve that? And I kept that as the target, as I kept that as the motivator. Understand that in order for you to achieve great things in business, listen, it could be something materialistic. There's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is it's a responsibility to go after and not limit yourself to what you can create. So I worked my butt off, and I kept my eyes on the target. Later that year, it was actually October of 2004, I too drive up into the parking lot in slow motion in my silver, brand new BMW 5 Series. What I did is I allowed myself to believe that I can create something greater for myself. I challenged myself that I don't have to follow the status quo, that I can create, and whatever I see up here, I will create in the physical form. And that's the way I started looking and approaching my marriage. Because slowly it was declining to a point where we couldn't even be in the same room. But I forgot to focus on what I truly wanted. All I was doing was focus on the things that I didn't want. And that's negative self-talk, right? Conceding to the things we don't want. And I was negative self-talk in our marriage on a consistent basis. She doesn't understand me. It's tough. I'll never make her happy. I'm not happy. Divorce is the only solution. So when you challenge that and when you refocus on the target of what you do want for your business, what you do want for your marriage, what you do want, materialistic things, which are truly unimportant. But hey, listen, we're going to be here. Why not create and get the things that we want? So I started looking at that, and it was a very proud moment, but it also shattered what I thought was possible for me. That was the most important thing. Realizing that I have to just keep telling myself that I can and not laughing when something seems bigger than what I can create. Like I did with Carla. And side note, Carla's owned 4 or 5 different Range Rovers over the years. Brand new. Sport, full size, and we've moved on. Because again, we've seen something greater for ourselves. And for some of you in business, it's been a real challenge. It's been a real challenge because it's this negative self-talk that is really limiting yourself on what you can create. We continue to say things like, I'm not good at marketing. I'm not good on video. I'm not good on the phone. I don't write very good emails. Like all these things are constantly on the forefront of your mind. It's negative self-talk over and over and over again. And even with your health, we're constantly just making excuses and buying into these stories of what the facts are when they're complete lies. Some of the things that we may be saying is things like, it's too expensive. It's my genetics. I'll never be good at public speaking. I hate doing videos. I only help family and friends in my business. That's essentially saying I can't grow my business because, hey, I only help family and friends. I'm very selective on who I work with, which is BS, right? You're just trying to create a story of why you're not building a business that's growing exponentially. I only sell to family and friends. Okay, I already said it. It's a bad day. How many times have we said that? It's a bad day. After one small situation. What we do is we buy into these lies and then we make them fact. Instead of saying it's just a bad situation. Let me see what I can do to turn this day around. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. How can we concede that it's going to be a bad day at 9 o'clock in the morning? And there's even harsher renditions of negative self-talk. I'm lazy. How many times have you said that? I've said that several times. I'm not committed. I can't do anything right. And then there's fear-based negative self-talk. I'll never succeed. I will never get another listing. I remember saying this, and it sounds so silly, and I want to get into this conversation about how childlike we can become. Childlike. I said, no one will ever join my brokerage. And I remember saying that to myself. After feeling defeated, right? I would have, agents come and join me, and that was almost solidify my existence if they joined A's and Associates. But the moment they left, I would feel completely depleted and defeated. And I would feel like I would make up this story like they would go and then talk to this other agent and then this other agent, and then all of 40,000 agents would know not to come to A's and Associates. Like this was what was going on in my mind. And that's why I think we were limited on how fast we grew for a very long time. We were stuck at like 40 and 50 agents for a while. It's because I would really sabotage the growth because I was believing to these lies. Then, I would think people would laugh at me. They'll think I'm dumb. They'll think, we're going to close our doors. Like these are things that I was constantly telling myself, which would limit my overall growth because my focus was on the wrong things. See, and again, negative self-talk is conceding to the things you really don't want. And we have to be aware, right? And a lot of us don't know because, again, this is a behavior we learn. This is a behavior we continue to reinforce. And we don't realize that we are in this space. But if you're limited, if you've seen very little growth in your life, right? If you're constantly facing the same challenges over and over, consider that the negative self-talk is more prevalent in your life than what you think it is. I know it was, again, for myself for many, many years. And it does creep in from time to time. Whenever I face a challenge, sometimes, like I said on the I am statement, I forget what I'm made of, but I also forget how powerful my mind is to create what I do want. And again, it's leaning into this and realizing that when you're in this space, when you start believing this negative self-talk, it leads to more feelings of negativity, to a point where we're shutting down, where we're depressed or highly anxious. And we start saying things to our family that just doesn't make sense, right? We start saying things to ourselves. We act childlike. We have these tantrums. right? And that's the way I like to describe it, like a man-child, right? We start pouting. We start acting in very much the ways that a toddler would act when we don't get our way. And we got to be able to identify these things because it's slowing you down, your progression. But one of the major things that we have to do is identify those patterns, identify those thoughts. So when you're in a place where you're trying to shut down or you're talking to yourself, I want you to take a step back. I want you to look at yourself from the third person perspective, and you'll realize how comical it is. Acting like a child, acting helpless, acting like there's no solution, acting like it's the end of the world. You'll realize how comical it truly is as you're going through these tantrums. Crying for no reason, under the covers. Like, I look at my behaviors back then. Holy shit. Is that some funny stuff going on there? Closing up all the windows, getting under my covers in bed, moping, feeling sorry for myself. It's comical. And I think we almost have to make it, personify that comedy. Personify those feelings. Make it into a real person, right? Like, these tantrums are comical. Thinking that we don't have the solutions within us. Like having these outbursts of frustration. Showing this emotion that's unbecoming us, right? It really is childlike. And when you put a spin on that, where you actually identify it as a, there was one time I was watching, Saturday Night Live. And I remember this character very specifically, where it was a person that was known of being like a downer. They called her Debbie Downer. Do you remember that? Debbie Downer. and it's taken a life on its own. Where we describe others when they're being down, we even describe them as Debbie Downers. And it's really personifying the behaviors and realizing it's dysfunctional and comical. As you start telling yourself these lies, this negative self-talk, I want you to take a step back and realize how childlike it truly is. Because when you see it as comical, when you see it as a joke, then you could do something about it. Then you can say, yeah, this is kind of dumb. Look how I'm reacting. It's like a little puppy putting his tail between his legs. It's unbecoming. It's not who you are. And when you really look at it that way, it'll motivate you to go really find a solution. Because those behaviors are really comical. You saying things to yourself like, I'll never get another buyer. I'll never get another listing. It's comical, right? You shutting down and crying uncontrollably. Thinking that you're not capable of it. It's comical if you look at it from that approach. Now, the feelings are very real at the time. But when you put a spin to it, it doesn't have to be very real. It can just be a challenge that you need to overcome, a problem with a solution that you have to discover. But if we buy more into those thoughts, thinking that you're incapable of, you're not worthy enough, you're too dumb to figure this out, then you'll get much the same. But identifying how we talk to ourselves is very, very important. I had to catch myself in saying, why is it laughable for me to say that we can never afford that vehicle? Instead, I started finding solutions on how I could. Very much like your business, and that's something that you really have to hone into. If you're constantly facing these challenges in your business, there are some beliefs that you are buying into. The very beliefs that are limiting you from creating what you want. I can't tell you how satisfied it felt driving up to that parking lot. Like Ruth said, right? Acknowledge in slow motion. It was a very proud moment for me. because there was a time where I thought it was not possible. And these are the things that we have to constantly lean into. If you're not selling the $5 to $10 million, $20 million in real estate, analyze your words. Analyze the thoughts that are coming up to mind. And there's a lot of negative self-talk, and part of it is pointing it out and say, hey, this is comical. Because I've proven in my past that I'm capable of so much more. So the way to be able to not only identify and come to a solution is, the first thing is you got to listen to what you're saying. Throughout the day, are you complaining most of the time? Are you complaining even little things? Are you complaining it's too cold, it's too hot? These are little things that we have to just understand that creates more negativity and that we've allowed it to just rule our life. So when you do talk to yourself, is it positive or negative? And for the most part, if we're running a business, a lot of times it's negative. It is. Identify it. And then challenge it. The second step to this is challenging those thoughts. Understand that what would occur if that was a complete lie? What would happen if the story we're believing was completely false? And we're in this situation on a constant basis. If you're, and most of you are really good friends, great family members, great parents, and we know exactly what to do whenever they come with us with a specific challenge, or they explain a doubt to us. Like when my daughter explains doubt to me, I know exactly what to say. And many of you know exactly what to say. And those are the very same words that we now have to believe. So as you're believing these thoughts that your future is not going to change, that you'll never lose that weight, you need to challenge those thoughts immediately. Imagine if your own daughter spoke to herself that way, or she was telling you about that. Mom, Dad, I'm always going to be this way. I'm never going to be happy. What would you tell them? We got to tell ourselves the same thing. Because we will create in life what we feed into our minds. And finally, it is completely just seeing the other side of what it is that we're saying. I'm not good at public speaking. I'm a killer on stage. I just need to get the reps in. Right? It's changing the dynamic, a complete overhaul of those thoughts. Because when we start thinking about those things and then marry it up to the I am statement, it really gives you and propels you forward. It gives you the confidence that it's always been within you. But it starts with this, with business. Like, what struggles are you having in business? You start identifying that there's a lot of negative self-talk there. And you talk your ways out of creating videos, of posting every day, of following up. You're talking your way out of it because of this negative self-talk. Same thing with your marriage. The struggles, the lack of communication, the lack of love, patience, and respect. Negative self-talk. To its core, you're believing a story that may not be true. And again, we have to just first identify what it is and then back that up with I am. I've created a life that 5 years ago wasn't possible for me. But the more I believe in myself and the more I stop the negative self-talk, what was once impossible is possible. And I've shouted that story over and over, and I'm not going to stop. As I go by the building, as I'm seeing the new headquarters being built out, negative self-talk would have never created that. Just realizing I am capable of more. So guys, what are you getting from this conversation? I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that when I'm in a tantrum, when I'm in this place of pity, that it's comical. Because I know what I'm made of. I know what I've been through. I know what I've overcome. It's silly to think otherwise. So you want to shatter your story? Look at it from a comical standpoint. And I want you to shatter those stories and just keep moving forward. And you'll face those challenges today, this week, next month, this year. Take a moment to reflect and say, this is some silly stuff here. Let me go figure this thing out. Let me go solve this problem. Let me get more clients. As opposed to just getting stuck. All right, guys, what are you getting from this conversation? I do want to thank everyone for joining me in today's Mindset Mastery. And Roger, this 12-week target book and DTW coaching has helped me create more than I ever could in all areas of my life. Roger, you're having your best year yet. And I love the constant reflection. And even when things don't go our way, we realize, hey, maybe I bought into some stories that are not true. Let me make that shift right now. And that's where you've been at. Because we're going to have our ups and downs. All of us are. But it's fallen into the trap that those tantrums are true, right? That those childlike behaviors are true. Like, we can create what we want. We just have to remind ourselves of that. And we have, Caroline said very true, right? And I'm not sure what you were alluding to, but we know what we can create once again. So let's start off the week with that. And again, I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Mindset Mastery. And I want to remind you that you can catch last week's episode, It was a very powerful conversation on badassagents.com. And I'll talk to you soon.